commissioners, because we are dealing with the most important stakeholder of the work that we do, that is the consumer. We're enjoined here by a noble cause of empowering consumers by making sure that we strike the balance between the protection of consumer rights as well as really asking for an increased advocacy in encouraging businesses to act in an ethical and responsible way. Ladies and gentlemen, our theme for this year's World Consumer Rights Day is empowering consumers and balancing consumer rights with ethical business practices. This is an event which is a collaboration between the Competition Commission, the National Consumer Commission, the Consumer Protection Forum, as well as the Mpumalanga Department of Economic Development and Tourism. One of the most important things, commissioners, that I wish to appreciate with the 7th administration is how we've elevated the importance of collaboration. I was saying earlier to Deputy Commissioner Mabuza, who is now acting commissioner for the National Consumer Commission, how we have witnessed that collaboration making an impact in spreading an important message of protecting consumers against illicit goods, unsafe food products, and understandard or under-quality products that we've seen being consumed by our unsuspecting consumers and leading to deaths and sickness of millions, if not hundreds of South Africans. And I thought that collaboration have shown that working together, we can really do more. Ladies and gentlemen, with these few words, allow me to introduce my panel for today, who are obviously going to lead communication in terms of the official unveiling of our program, an advocacy program for empowering consumers across the length and breadth of South Africa and beyond, really calling for consumers to play an active role in making sure that their rights, one, are known, and that they work as a unit, as we've seen in various parts of the world, but also calling on business to really do business in an ethical way. On my immediate right is Acting Commissioner for the National Consumer Commission, Mayor Tezi Mabuza, and next to Commissioner is Mr. Bonani Dube, who is the Acting Director for Business Regulations and Governance at the Mpumalanga Department of Economic Development and Tourism, our host for this year's commemoration of the World Consumer Rights. Congratulations, Mr. Dube. And to his immediate right is Mr. Andile Gwabeni, who's the Acting Commissioner for the Competition Commission of South Africa. And to my far right is Ms. Bobby Kweyama, who is the Head of Education and Advocacy at the National Consumer Commission. And on that note, I wish to invite you to the podium to please unpack the theme for this year's World Consumer Rights that we know is not only celebrated in South Africa, but the world over. But also, Mr. Dube, now that we are going to Mpumalanga, we've asked other provinces to do alike and commemorate this day and make sure that they spread the message, as I indicated earlier, that we can only achieve the objective of consumer welfare and protection by sharing this responsibility as South Africans and those that have been given the responsibility to educate and empower our consumers. Ms. Poppy Kweyama, please join us on the podium.
Thank you, Sia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The World Consumer Rights Day this year will be taking place on the 14th of March. Though it's on the normal day is the 15th of March, just because the 15th of March falls within a on a weekend. So the World Consumer Rights Day takes place here on the 15th of March. This global event aims to boost awareness about consumer rights and the push for fair trade practices in the marketplace. World Consumer Rights Day, first observed in 1983, has become a key event for promoting consumer education awareness. This date was chosen to commemorate President J.F. Kennedy's address to the U.S. Congress on the 15th of March in 1962, where he became the first world leader to formally recognize consumer rights. He introduced the Consumer Bill of Rights, which highlighted 4 key rights at that time. Those rights are rights to safety, meaning protection from hazardous products and services, right to be informed, that means access to accurate and truthful information about goods and services, the right to choose, which means freedom to select a variety of quality products and services. The last right, according to Mr. Kennedy at that time, was the right to be heard, which means that assurance that consumers' interests will be considered by government and businesses. Over the years, these rights have been expanded, including the right to redress, right to consumer education, right to healthy environment, and right to basic need. I'm just going to unpack those rights a little bit. Right to equality prohibits unfair discrimination against the person or category of persons on the ground or race, gender, socioeconomic status in the provision of goods and services. The right to privacy limits the use of consumers' personal information, for example, cell phone numbers, ID numbers, addresses, etc., and etc. The right to choose gives the consumer right to select a supplier and purchase goods and services of their choice. Okay. The right to information gives consumer rights to information in simple and plain language, display of prices, receipts, and so on. Fair and responsible marketing prohibits the use of force and duress to undue influence in marketing of goods and services. The right to fair and reasonable terms and conditions prohibits use of unfair contract terms, unilateral changes to contracts, and contracting out of consumer rights. The right to fair value, good quality, and safety gives consumer rights to safe and good quality goods, services free from defects. Suppliers' accountability to consumers gives consumer rights to get their monies back with interest in instances where the supplier decides to sell goods bought on lay-by and so on. However, despite the progress made, challenges still persist in this area. Many consumers still fall victim of fraud, misinformation, unsafe products, and unethical business practices. In today's digital world, issues such as data privacy, online scams, misleading digital advertisement, and unfair pricing have added new dimensions to consumer protection. This year's global theme, determined by Consumer International for World Consumer Rights Day, a just transition to sustainable lifestyle, emphasizes the need to make sustainable choices accessible and affordable for all consumers. However, we have a South African theme. Our South African theme is empowering consumers, balancing rights with ethical business practices, which was identified because it resonates with the challenges faced by South African consumer. Why this particular theme? Each year brings different challenges in the consumer protection space. It has always been our law, our view that our mandate that no consumer should be subject to unfair and unquestionable practices from unscrupulous suppliers. It is also our view that for a harmonized marketplace, we need to empower consumers while nudging suppliers into complying with various consumer laws. The theme seeks to educate businesses about their legislative responsibilities, whilst raising awareness and education amongst consumers on their rights and responsibilities as well. The consumer protection space has witnessed multiple enforcement operations targeting preventing illicit goods and substandard food products from having sold to unsuspecting consumers, underscoring the urgent need to address the widespread of issues to safeguard public health and rights. Most burning issue in the South African consumer protection space lies in the manufacturing, distribution, and consumption of non-compliant goods, which has garnered attention following numerous media reports exposing such products during the law enforcement raids. Recent raids on local spaza shops in various communities have revealed expired food items on the shelves, prompting their removal and confiscation. But while the laws protecting us, it is our responsibilities as consumers to stay informed, demand ethical business practices, and use our collective voice to drive change. Frankly speaking, the media represent the most active area of consumer activism in South Africa. It is the same media that brought the issues to the attention of the authorities, drove change, demanded accountability, while educating the consumers. We value your good work and thank you to you, media. The National Consumer Commission, as custodian of the Consumer Protection Act, is responsible to ensure that South Africa commemorates World Consumer Rights Day annually. In the country, and it is the consumer protection space in the country is a concurrent jurisdiction between the National Consumer Commission and the provinces. In South Africa, consumer rights are protected by the Consumer Protection Act, which ensures that every citizen has the right to fair, honest, and transparent dealings. Schedule 4 of the Constitution of South Africa states that the consumer protection is a function of concurrent national and provincial legislative competence. It is also acknowledged that within the consumer protection arena, there are also other various regulatory authorities established in terms of various pieces of consumer protection legislation. Given the Schedule 4 Constitution mandate and in spirit of cooperation, a voluntary national structure spearheaded by the National Consumer Commission in the form of Consumer Protection Forum, or CPF in short, was established. The CPF is made up of 9 provinces, which are the provincial consumer protection offices, as well as regulators with consumer protection mandate in South Africa. The NCC and the CPF collaborate annually on planning and celebrating the World Consumer Rights Day. Consumer awareness is key part of strong economy. Consumers must know their legal rights and use them when needed. This doesn't just boost the quality of products made and leads to happier consumer and improved customer satisfaction. This year, South Africa will be commemorating this day in Mpumalanga, hosted by the NCC, National Consumer Commission, the CPF, in partnership with the Mpumalanga Department of Education, of Economic Development and Tourism, as it already been said, the Competition Commission. Additionally, there has been a number of sponsors who also contributed to this event. I will name just a few from our sponsors. The Consumer Goods and Services Ombud, CGSO, MIOSA, Motor Industry Ombud of South Africa, South African Bureau of Standards, amongst others. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
You may clap, colleagues. It's allowed.
I can move.
Thank you so much.
I can move from here, right?
Yes, you may have your seat. Collaboration, and collaboration. As I welcome a colleague from the Competition Commission, Karabo Mutaung Mohlala, who has been leading a very loud campaign around these issues. I will be failing in my duty if I don't recognize Karabo. In our opinion column, colleagues, we are calling for consumers, and we have extended Ms. Poppy Koyama to the media, the fourth estate, as the eyes and ears of the Competition Commission, as well as the Consumer Commission and various departments of the economic development, for really picking up on these issues, because if they are not there, we sometimes not in a position to practically pick up on each and every complaint and or issues or challenges that are faced by the consumers. And we would like to re-extend this invitation to our consumers who are watching us at home. This is a hybrid event. We are streaming live on the GCIS YouTube link. So as we communicate this message, my panelists, you must be rest assured that we're talking to South Africans and the world over. Because we want to cover the lost ground, colleagues, I am going to invite in the chronology in the program my three speakers. The first two speakers will be talking to contextualizing the role of the National Consumer Commission. I know there's always a confusion between these two sister and brotherly organizations, the Consumer Commission and the Competition Commission. So the Acting Commissioner, Ms. Tezi Mabuza, will lead us in contextualizing the role of the National Consumer Commission in protecting consumers. He will immediately be followed by Mr. Andile Gwabeni, who today is not the head of advocacy, but the acting commissioner for the Competition Commission of South Africa, to really unpack more on the role of the Competition Commission in as far as protecting consumer rights. And immediately after that, I would invite Mr. Bonani Dube, who is our host for this year's commemoration, Karabo, of the World Consumer Rights Day. I hope there's a lot waiting for us at that side. If Mr. Dube, you understand the responsibility of being a host city. You would remember this during the 2010 World Cup, what it means to be a host city. So we are looking forward to traveling to Mbombela and interacting with business and consumers and all other stakeholders, including the media. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I now wish to invite Ms. Tezi Mabuza, who is the Acting Commissioner for the National Consumer Commission, to just take us through what role does the National Consumer Commission play in this area of work. Commissioner?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. my fellow panelists. Today it's so exciting, looking at the Competition Commission and the NCC, and also with our host, is that when we look at consumer protection landscape, we sometimes look at what we consume, but we don't think of the two sides of the same coin, wherein we are looking at the demand side and the supply side. Immediately when you think of consumers and then you think of the competition, sometimes you see them as disjoint entities. But what you have is that for the economy to strive, you need both entities. That would mean that you need the quality infrastructure, you need the competition to lower the prices. But again, for you to do the manufacturing, you still need consumers to demand or buy those products, not so the economy will fail. Now, my purpose today is to really talk about the consumer protection infrastructure in South Africa. When you look at consumer protection, one, think of a fair, accessible, efficient, sustainable, and a responsible market for the benefit of consumers in general. And the purpose thereof is actually to make sure that there is fair business practices, as we said in terms of the theme, that is always ethical, to make sure that consumers are actually getting the best or actually the congruent quality for the money that they have paid. We also are looking at the purpose of making sure that we reduce and we ameliorate any disadvantages that has been experienced by consumers in assessing the supply of goods and services. But what we are looking at immediately when we think of consumer protection, we're looking at creative ways that we should be employing that are innovative to make sure that we protect the interest of consumers, ensure that the market is accessible, is transparent, and there is efficient redress when something goes wrong or consumers are subjected to abuse. Now, when you are looking at now the consumer education and information program, and then this we take it from the United Guidelines on Consumer Protection in South Africa as well, is that when we're looking of that information or the advocacy that we are looking at, it would be essential that we cover product labeling. And immediately when you talk of product labeling, especially when we're looking at the previous event that we have recently in South Africa, is that we had issues around your date markings, we had issues around the issues of the ingredients. And immediately when you think of that, you think of the Department of Health. But then also we think of the product hazards that are being actually perpetuated when then the issues of date markings and quality are not adhered to. Immediately when you think of the hazards and all that, you will think of both the conformity standards and the compulsory specifications. And I am thinking now of the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications that has joined us today. Its purpose is actually to make sure that every product wherein there is a compulsory specification, could it be the lights that are actually illuminating the room, that they meet the specifications. And the one area as well that we think of all the time when we think about consumer protection is about how do we go about to make sure that if there are disputes in the market, that consumers will actually get that redress. We're looking at agencies and consumer protection organizations. We're looking at those agencies that we will call the ombuds. We spoke here, my colleague spoke about the motor industry ombuds, and we spoke about the national also financial ombud as well that we will be meeting later on. And you also are talking of the also the consumer protection and the CGSO as well. Those are the ombuds that will be giving redress in terms of mediation, but you're also looking at us that are regulators, that our role is to make sure that we investigate and we make sure that we prosecute on behalf of consumers. And the other area as well that we think of immediately when we think of consumer protection landscape, we're thinking of what my colleague spoke about, the information that consumers should be receiving, that will be talking of the measures, that is the measures, the prices, the quality, the credit conditions, and also the availability of basic necessities. We also, when we think of consumer protection, we also think of the circular economy. We're looking at environmental protection, that makes sure that when we buy products, we use them, and then we think of the remnants, especially when you're looking at the issues of e-waste and the harm that will do to our economy and also to the environment if we don't agitate for responsible behavior in terms of consumers and also those that are manufacturing those goods to ensure that we dispose of those remnants responsibly. But again, when you think of consumer protection environment in South Africa, you think of the financial services. Here we are talking about the financial services regulator as well, wherein we are looking at both your short-term, your medium-term, your short-term insurance and your long-term insurance, and also around the issues of making sure that the banking services is also safe for our consumers. But then what is really important as well is that you would be looking at also some of your agencies within the energy. We're looking at the National Energy Regulator that makes sure that at least we have efficient use of our energy all the time and the pricing actually meet the needs of consumers in South Africa. So really, as I said, it's not only about the Consumer Protection Act, is that every regulator, my colleague spoke about the 8 rights, is that when that service is not covered by the Consumer Protection Act, it means that that act that actually provides the same protection for consumers must make sure that those 8 basic rights of consumer protection that is embedded in the Consumer Protection Act is also covered by any other regulation. So when you're looking at the consumer protection infrastructure in South Africa, some those I have named, you would be thinking of the consumer protection agencies themselves. That will be the National Consumer Commission, the National Credit Regulator, and its tribunal as well. And then you will be looking at the quality infrastructure. We're speaking of the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications, the South African Bureau of Standards, your SANAS, and all that. All those infrastructures that make sure that we have quality, we have standards, and our products are acceptable in the country. You also think of the Competition Commission and also the tribunal that makes sure that whatever that we do, there is always competition that is fair, that actually makes sure that we have entries for those agencies or for those markets that there is actually monopoly. But we also look at the supervision of the conduct of the financial sector. We also look at the energy sector. We look at the medical scheme, and we also look at tourism. Those are some of the industries that drive the economy, and we have regulators for all those areas. As my colleague also indicated, that immediately when you think of consumer protection infrastructure, as I've mentioned them, is that we would not exist in silos because we will never be effective. We're looking at Chapter 3 and Section 41 of our Constitution, and then also we're thinking of the principles of cooperation within intergovernmental relations. That would mean that any other regulation that gives the best protection to South Africans normally will prevail when there are maybe some uncertainties in terms of who should be taking precedence. But what is important as well is that when there will be disputes amongst us, there is a need that we talk, and for the sake of consumers, that we make sure that the best regulator that will always offer the best protection will normally take the lead and guide. As my colleague has said, that we normally would also have compulsory forums that we will form. Those would be the ones on voluntary associations that would normally do to make sure that we enhance ourselves, we share in competences and skills, but we actually edify one another so that we make sure that we develop cost-effective and coordinated strategies of making sure that when we enforce any of our rights, that we actually become effective. We would actually sometimes also develop protocols amongst ourselves to make sure that we coordinate all matters that are related to consumer protection. We also make sure that amongst ourselves, we inculcate compliance for a conducive business environment to support the economic sustainability for both businesses and consumers alike. And what we do as a collective is that we facilitate cooperative governance with respect to consumer protection issues. Now, when you're looking at us, and I'm sure that I might be repeating some of the other things, the membership that we're talking of, as I said, it's all when we're talking of the concurrency, it's all the provincial consumer protection affairs offices in all of South Africa. And our role in that as the Commission is to make sure that we set the standards, we make sure that when we communicate, that we communicate the same message when it's related to the consumer protection issues. And then also when we're looking of our standard bodies and all that, we know that when there will be other certain compulsory specifications on issues like what you had around the issues of tinned fish and all that, we will be talking to the national regulator for compulsory specifications, but making sure that when we enforce around that space, that we together with the national regulator for compulsory specifications, who would work together. And wherein there are conformity standards, we will work together with the South African Bureau of Standards. We also think of any other area that has to do with either your cell phones and all that, we will be looking at ICASA. We make sure that while the National Consumer Commission looks at the issues of contracts, ICASA will make sure that whenever you buy your cell phone, wherever you are, there is always reach, there is always network. And then what also some of us are looking at is that we have been talking about the NHI and issues of the medical schemes and all that. We also have in our midst the Council for Medical Schemes that makes sure that when you are looking for that top up in relation to your medical scheme and all that, or maybe also an insurance for the low income group, that they make sure that consumers in that space are regulated. We have other departments as well that will support. That will be the Department of Health when it comes to issues of your labeling and all that in terms of anything that is consumable in terms of the Food, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act. And then we would also be looking at the Department of Tourism when it comes to all the tourism offerings and all that. And then we also look at all the also the national financial ombud schemes, as I said, when it comes to issues of your financial protection and all that. Ladies and gentlemen, is that though we are having all these structures, is that as a consumer, as a South African, is that sometimes the names and those groupings that we talk about, they don't matter to a South African. Is that they see all of us as government. Is that when I buy a product, when I buy a loaf of bread, they don't even want to know whether the national regulator for compulsory specifications had made sure that that 700 grams of loaf of bread is really 700 grams. They do not even want to know whether the Department of Health, in terms of the bread that they bought, in terms of the list, is important. All that they want to know is that the bread has the correct measure, the bread is safe for consumption, and it's priced correctly. So that is our need, and there is a need. That's why today we come together cooperating with one another to make sure that for the sake of consumers in South Africa, for this week, we are going to be unpacking all those laws, but then for that square kilometers that we will be touching this week, we want to make sure that at least as regulators, our presence will be felt, that we would at least make a difference, and then that together, ourselves and the media and all the other regulators, that we are going to at least try as much as possible to unpack all these regulations, but to make them work for South Africans wherever we'll be touching them at Mpumalanga, especially wherein we will try to make very good examples of those suppliers that we will find wanting, because they would not be actually observing any of those regulators. So we have an opportunity as regulators, colleagues. All that we need to do is to cooperate with one another, make sure that the value chain is simple, but what is important as well, open our doors and be the first one and say that even if I might not be the correct regulator, if there is no wrong door for a consumer in South Africa, for any other regulator, if we can't help a consumer, we would at least point them to the right door. And we will cooperate, and I thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, colleagues. Mr. Kwabeni.
Good morning, members of the media, my fellow panelists. Let me also acknowledge in the room Mr. Mahale Mushala, who is the head of cartels, who has come to support this very important program. Before I say anything, Program Director, I saw that you referred to me as the acting commissioner. I don't want to get into trouble from both back home and stakeholders thinking that I have powers that I don't have. I'm here as a representative of the commissioner on this very important occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say that it is indeed a singular honor for the Competition Commission to collaborate with the National Consumer Commission and the Mpumalanga Department of Economic Development and Tourism in commemoration of the World Consumer Rights Day in 2025. This indeed is a reflection, as you said, Program Director, of the commitment of the 7th administration, not only to collaborate, but for an all-of-government approach in dealing with the issues that confront South Africa today. As if we act on our own, we will not be able to resolve these enormous challenges that our country confronts. I must say that we will be jointly hosting a few activities this week to address a very important topic, as it has already been outlined, a very important topic that not only talks to the well-being of citizens, but also aligns with the priorities of the 7th administration. And just for the sake of completion, I think I must remind you of these important priorities. The first one being that of inclusive growth, the second being that of dealing with poverty and the cost of living in our country, and also beginning to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state. We are here today to make sure that competition policy and the Competition Commission plays its role of making sure that we protect consumers and ensure that markets are fair and competitive. South Africa, as we all know, our history bequeathed to us a very problematic economic structure where there are few large businesses that often dominate key industries. And this results in high levels of inequality, unemployment, and poverty in our country. And we need to confront both of these at the same time for the betterment of our people. In recognition of this, the architects of the democratic dispensation created instruments to begin to assist South Africa to deal with its past. And these recognize the need for competition policy and defined its role as that of promotion of fairness, of dealing with the levels of concentration in our economy, and ensuring that consumers benefit from lower prices, better quality goods, and more choices. And I think it's important to understand the importance of a consumer choice. And this is where competition policy comes in and plays a very important role. If businesses decide to collude and allocate markets, which is Mahale's mandate, and allocates markets between themselves, whilst it sounds like something that does not concern you, it concerns you directly because it takes away your choice. It also takes away your ability to have access to competitive goods. It also results in increased prices. So when you see these behaviors, you must not say, it is not my business. It is your business. It's going to hit you in the pocket. They also charged that the competition policy must also play an important role in promoting participation of small businesses and firms owned by historically disadvantaged people. Every time a consumer is purchasing groceries, booking a flight, or using an online service, we are choosing products. And if these are not operating in the right environment, this will affect our ability to choose the right products. This will affect the prices we pay, the quality we receive, and the level of innovation that we are getting in the market, as all of these are shaped by competition dynamics in the market. So we are not an obscure body that is dealing with big words. We are on a daily basis doing work that affects each and everyone's life as we participate in markets as market participants. So competition regulation plays a crucial role in protecting consumers by ensuring that competition in markets is also in the public interest. And we do this through various tools that are at our disposal as competition authorities. And these tools are there to help us to make sure that we deal with prohibited conduct. Prohibited conduct is practices that the Act has said that these acts are not welcome and are not acceptable in South Africa. And some of these conducts, by the way, have been criminalized. That is the conduct of cartels, which includes collusion, market allocation. That is a criminal offense in South Africa. So these tools that we have are there to make sure that we protect consumers from excessive prices, from practices that limit their choice, and also from any conduct that distorts the markets that we have. We are partnering with the NCC today and the department to promote competition in the South African economy, as we believe it is competitive markets that have a potential to bring a growing and inclusive economy. It is when businesses compete and strive to offer better prices, superior products, and greater innovation that South Africa will be what we want it to be. Consumers, of course, have to benefit from this through fairer prices, higher quality of goods, and more and better choices for goods and services that they can get into. It is indeed important that whilst we recognize that most market players conduct themselves in a manner that promotes the objectives of the Competition Act, but there are instances, and these instances are not far in between, there are instances where we have to intervene and engage with those who conduct in practices that harm the consumers and weaken market integrity. It is for this reason that the Competition Commission has to play its part and has to be there on the ground in Mpumalanga and everywhere in our country to make sure that all of us as citizens, including you as members of the media, we are responsible for making sure that we call out those that do not subscribe to these important objectives. The Commission, of course, is just one of the competition institutions. We have the Competition Commission. The Commission is responsible for investigation and litigation in respect of conduct that is prohibited by the Act, and also with respect to major regulation. We also have the Competition Tribunal. We also have the Competition Appeal Court. The Commission, of course, is using 4 instruments to advance its key work. One of those is the regulation of mergers and acquisitions, where we have to look at the effects of a particular merger on competition and also on the public interest. It is also to enforce the Act to deal with prohibited conduct. It is also to look at market-wide interventions to promote competition and the public interest. You will note that we recently launched 2 market inquiries that are dealing with some of the key issues that are happening in those markets. And of course, they also deal with the effects of those on the consumers. And without a strong competition laws, markets would be controlled by a few powerful players, leaving consumers vulnerable to high prices and poor service, because there will be no need for me to invest in better infrastructure as a business, for me to invest in product development if I'm the only one in the market, because you have no choice but to buy from me. And therefore, a strong competition regulatory framework prevents the abuse of power and fosters an economic environment where businesses compete and consumers reap the benefits. South Africa's competition policy helps create a stronger, more inclusive economy where consumers have better choices, lower prices, and improved services. As consumers, we must stay informed and support these policies and make sure that we uphold competition so that we make sure that we root out and we call out any uncompetitive behavior that we see on the market. And some of our greatest cases are cases that have come from consumers who, out of their vigilance, recognized that there is something wrong here, there is something that does not add up, and were able to come to the Competition Commission and say, please look at this, we think there is something wrong here. And the Commission is indeed very proud to be part of these events that are meant to engage with various stakeholders on the ground so that we can all work together in the promotion of the objectives of the Competition Act. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that we will all be there, so we won't only be here, we will all be there on the ground, supporting the team, and which on our side will be led by Karabo and her team in making sure that we interact with all stakeholders and make sure that we all understand that what this animal called Competition Commission is about. It's not a competitions commission. It doesn't deal with whether you won a competition and whether you got your prize. It is about making sure that there's competition in the markets for your benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sia, and good morning to the members of the media and to everyone, panelists. I'm standing here on behalf of my province with a full mandate from my head of department, Ms. Sirakalala, and our MEC, Ms. Masilela, as well as our Premier. They are all aware that I'm here to represent the province. I want to thank the Competition Commission, the NCC, the Consumer Protection Forum, and other key players in the consumer protection space for nominating Mpumalanga as a province to host this very important national event. And we are aware that the 15th of March is not only a national day to commemorate the rights of consumers in our country, but it's a worldwide event, as Sis Poppy outlined the origins of this event. As a province, we had to look at the role of a host, as Sia mentioned, that we had 2010 where we had South Africa hosting the world when it comes to the game of soccer. So we really had to go deep in understanding our role as the 2025 host in commemoration of consumer protection and the rights of consumers. So we are following other provinces that have been hosting this event. We are aware that KZN hosted the event, Northwest, Free State, Eastern Cape. They've excellently hosted this event. And when we raised the hand as to host this 2025 event as Mpumalanga, we said we are going to introduce the Mpumalanga flair into it. It won't be a normal one or an event that will be compared to other events. But as I'm speaking right now, there are key stakeholders, some who are representing the Competition Commission, NCC, other national regulators that have been outlined here. They've already started to hit the ground. Our program is a very detailed one, and it has already started, as I'm saying. As we are here, the first activities are now in place in one of the districts of our province, in Nkangala district. So there are workshops that are being conducted today. There are exhibitions that are being conducted. There are inspections that are being conducted. And these inspections are as per the mandates of the different regulators, as my panelists have outlined. We will be having the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications also conducting inspections in terms of their mandate. We've got inspectors also who are dealing with food safety issues, ICASA dealing with their relevant legislation, looking at the technical gadgets like cell phones in the shops, checking for those kinds of compliances. So it's a number of regulators, including Council of Medical Aid Scheme. There are quite a lot, colleagues, and it's now happening in our province as planned. So today, it's all in one of the districts, in Nkangala district. And then tomorrow, which is the 12th, the whole team, like today, they will be migrating from Nkangala district to Enhlanzeni district, which is where the main activities will be occurring. But the activities will be distributed to various municipalities that are in Enhlanzeni district. Our province is pro-rural, so we really appreciate this integrated approach in terms of addressing the ills that are happening. We are aware of the challenges that our country was recently exposed to in terms of people dying because of unsafe food products. So for the event to be in our province, we really appreciate all national stakeholders to be a part of this, that it is happening in Mpumalanga. So the events are starting today up until the 14th of March. And then on the 13th of March, that's where we will have we're starting with a breakfast session, which is headed by the Competition Commission. In that breakfast briefing session, the Competition Commission will lead on the deliberations of the day, there are key stakeholders from various industries that will be engaged on the issues that pertain to competition, unfair competition, being ethical in the conduct of business. So businesses and representatives from various industries have been invited to participate in that breakfast session. It will start around 7:30 until 11 in the morning. So it will also be driven by knowledgeable people so that they can unpack some of the issues and give direction as to how can we improve this space of consumer protection. And then on the 13th again, in the afternoon, there will be a symposium. What the Commission has proposed is that this symposium will take the form of a debate. There are students from various universities in our country that have been invited to give position papers. They've already been introduced to the topics and they are doing their research. So it's going to be an interesting one, commissioners, which is one of the exceptional things. I think if we look back at the history in terms of how we have conducted these ceremonies or commemorations, this one is now standing at its own level. So it's one of the new introductions. So we are looking forward to those deliberations and the outcomes of those deliberations. We believe that they will introduce a change in our policies and how we can conduct consumer protection in a more better way. So that will happen again on the 13th. And then in the evening of the 13th, we will be relaunching the Mpumalanga Consumer Court. I know there are a number of provinces that already have consumer courts in their space. Zusi Poppy had mentioned that the issue of consumer protection, national works with provinces. There is concurrent jurisdiction in that space. So we will be, as Mpumalanga, relaunching our consumer court. Consumer court members have been appointed, and we believe that that consumer court will play a pivotal role in terms of supporting and protecting consumers in our province. It is indeed one of our key highlights to revitalize this instrument to ensure consumer protection in our province. So that day of the 13th, in principle, will be headed by the Competition Commission. So on the 14th, as Sis Poppy said, that will be our main event. We are aware that traditionally the 15th, it's when we normally host, or it's the traditional day in terms of this Gregorian calendar, that 15th is the day when we celebrate consumer rights. But because it falls on a Saturday, so it's going to be on the 14th. That is the main event, which will be headed by the National Consumer Commission. And it will take another platform because we will be having key players in that session. But the NCC will be heading that event. And it is our prayer that we have the minister and our premier as well as other key players. We are aware already that there will be the MEC for Economic Development from the Free State. So indeed, this is a national event. Ours as Mpumalanga is to ensure that our guests are well taken care of, and we have learned from other provinces that have hosted the event before us that they've done an excellent job. So we won't be able to say anything right now in terms of what will be our score, but we will leave it to the members who will be participating there, even members of the media, to judge us. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, sir.
Well, colleagues, you heard it from Mr. Dube that you now have a responsibility to score the treatment that you would receive in the host city and province of Mbombela. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for my panelists for sharing pointed really articulations in terms of the purpose of this important campaign. I could not have asked for better speakers or panelists. I am reminded, Commissioner, about a very strong call, Mr. Magale, the acting representative of the Commissioner, beat me to it. I was going to recognize Mr. Magale as not only the member of the Executive Committee, but as a leading role player in terms of our enforcement. You remember, colleagues, that as the Competition Commission and the Consumer Commission, we were during COVID-19 seized with complaints that were not only emerging as the second pandemic during COVID-19 of excessive prices for essential pharmaceutical products, food, and others. We established what we called a war room. So Mr. Magale was one of the champions in the war room. The members of the media would remember some of the prosecutions that we carried out during that time. But what I was trying to say earlier, Commissioner, President Ramaphosa, during those family meetings, made a very strong call that looking at the margins that were charged to the vulnerable consumers, he made a call that maybe there should be a discussion on whether or not we should not criminalize the amount of exploitation that we've witnessed during that time, where we've investigated and prosecuted cases where consumers were charged up to 500% in profit margins. Similarly with the unsafe food products, maybe the country should have a debate of whether or not we should not criminalize those conduct. Fortunately, as I'm making this remark, I am reminded, a representative of the Commissioner, of the initiative that the Commission has embarked on, where we are calling on business to make use of our services as the Commission and ask for what we call advisory opinions, which are non-binding, of course, where we feel that sometimes business is in doubt in terms of how they should price certain products or they should carry themselves in situations where there's collaboration and coordination of information, where obviously, of course, we discourage collusions, that they should reach out to the Commission and ask the Commission, obviously, with a little bit of payment. We are a regulator. We are not selling, chocolate. I almost named the name of the product. But what we're trying to say really is that because we're in this campaign, we're going to be inviting the business community to use our services through our legal services, our advocacy division, to reach out to us and engage, even on measure control and assessments. We want to kind of bring to balance the interpretation, because there's always nuances on how we interpret the provisions of the Act. So the Commission is available to provide this service at a fee of course to business, to say that where you feel that you are in doubt, we are here to help. And I think that is the spirit of the theme of this year's Consumer Rights Day, where we're saying we're balancing the consumer rights with the ethical business practices in all markets. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, assisted by my colleagues, Peto, as well as Susanna, I am going to invite questions from the members of the media. I receive a WhatsApp here from my colleagues that the rules of engagement remain the same. You raise your hand, you introduce yourself and the media organization that you represent. And for the first round, we're going to afford you to a maximum of 2 questions. And if we take the second round, we can then maybe see how we deal with the follow-up questions. I must indicate that I have requested some of my colleagues, including Mr. Magale, to avail themselves for one-on-ones. I know I'm going to lose some of the members of the panel due to other competing responsibilities, but I do have Mr. Magale as well, just to maybe reflect on some of the cases that we have prosecuted during that time, which obviously we're looking at making sure that we bring about relief to our vulnerable consumers. May I please have an indication by a show of hands, colleagues who would like to go first? Unless, of course, Madam, you are number 1, that you are agreeing with me that this panel has done an excellent job in talking to the issues of today. I only have you, Madam. I think that will be the first and the last question for today. Of course, I have already offered colleagues one-on-ones after the session. Madam, please go ahead.
From Newsroom Africa. I just want to ask, obviously, as we prepare to mark this really important, Consumer Rights Day, reflecting on some of the issues that have happened in the past, would the panel say that they are accessible to people? One of the things that we did see during the many raids of spaza shops was people taking matters and consumer rights matters into their own hands. Many of them not aware of the regulatory bodies that exist. What are we doing in terms of being more accessible to people? While I understand consumers have a responsibility to report and flag things to you, many of them felt these were regulatory bodies that were a bit far-fetched. And I think as well, reflecting on that, families lost their children. Where are we in terms of still finding out the role of manufacturers and distributors and the responsibility that they carried in the recent issues that we saw with some of those products that were sold on the shelves? That's it.
Well, I will leave it to the discretion of the panel, but I think the 2 questions, one is cutting across in terms of accessibility, which is becoming very important in terms of our advocacy programs, but also NCC might want to just update what the NetJoins update is in terms of following up on those campaigns on the sector in terms of the unsafe products.
Thanks so much for that question. I think in our midst as well, from the National Consumer Commission, I have with me the head of complaints handling and investigations, that I think if we need more unpacking around some of the cases, that she would be talking much. And I also see the company secretary as well in terms of where we are around the issues of the investigations that we would have conducted. Now, in general, when we talk about the issues of accessibility, I think that in South Africa, as we're saying, the issue of concurrency is that normally the body that the consumers know best, it's where they will complain. Now, when it comes to the issues of consumer protection in the country in relation to concurrency, that's where in now you would find that consumers would really not know exactly where to go. And around the current issues that we're facing around the issues of poisoned food, I'll never say it's low quality food, but it was poisoned in terms of either the levels wherein this happened, is that we have, when it comes to issues of retail, we have the issues of where businesses is being registered and all that. That is the first area. And then we also have what we call the environmental health practitioners. That's their responsibility is to make sure that every business that actually sells food and all that meets the minimum requirement in terms of the certificate of acceptability, in terms of health, in terms of rodent controls and all that. So those are really the issues of the consumer knowing exactly where to start. And I would say that as government, that's where in now, when we were looking at this disaster that confronted us around the issue of food poisoning, that the actually president came in with the issue of calling all of us to a net joint so that we can collaborate and work together, so that then we have to come up with a solution. But I would say that we are still 20 years into democracy and then looking at like 13 years in terms of consumer protection. We really haven't made much inroads in terms of now South African consumers, especially people at our age, understanding where to go, how to complain. Because now, for our younger children, we are aware that we've covered the issues of consumer protection in the school curriculum, wherein it's being understood by the growing children that you will have to look at food. When you look at food, you look at your labeling and all that, and where to go in terms of complaining, just to change the paradigm and actually the manner in which as South Africans we were used to complaining. Because before, when bread was something wrong with your bread, somebody would like, no, put the bread down there, it's fine, it's just bread, but not looking at the 15 rand that they are spending for bread. Yes, we are not really as much as accessible as regulatory bodies. It's because now of these issues of concurrency, hence now the issue of working together. But then as well, what we had picked up, the same as with COVID, it's a lesson that we had learned, that it's easier for us to regulate the formal businesses, or wherein we could actually go in and issue a certificate to a business that we know. But when it comes to the informal part of our economy, we realize that we had a problem wherein when business is not formalized, we really don't know who is the owner and who to hold accountable. Hence now the campaign that we have now around net joints to make sure that businesses are registered, we know who is operating and where is operating. And then also as well, the issue of just the invoice. And this is also what we are urging our South Africans, that when you buy, insist on getting a receipt so that we can know where you bought from, and then not only for taxes, but as well that when we follow up on a business, we know exactly who is the person that we bought from. Because on these issues of poisoned food, we could not even say the children really bought from this spaza shop, though they will point out, but we could not hold some of the colleagues available. But I am sure that the NCC team, if they would like to say something, they will respond around the issue of where we are in relation to some of the cases that have been reported to the NCC that we are following in relation to investigations. Just one or two of those major cases, I'm sure they will be able to respond to that. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I think this is a very important question. As the Competition Commission, we don't think we are yet there. We think we still have a long way to go in making sure that there is general awareness. But what we are doing as the Competition Commission, of course, is investing in these programs. I think you did hear that already our teams are on the ground in terms of educating people so that we can really popularize the work that we are doing. But we are also trying to leverage on other institutions so that we can really achieve this all-of-government approach that we have been talking about in the 7th administration, so that as we work as regulators, we work in a collaborative manner. There are a couple of things that we specifically are looking at doing over in our new strategy. The first one, of course, is that of intensifying education and awareness campaigns. We will be looking at various innovative approaches so that we make sure that we increase the level of awareness. We think that when people stop believing that we are competitions commission, then we would have achieved this objective. The second one is the advocacy program, where we train companies, we train everybody who invites us to support in terms of making sure that they understand what the Act says, because we want both the industry players to comply and also the consumers and other stakeholders to know when we are not doing what we are supposed to do. The third element, which is going to be a key theme for the next 5 years for the Commission, is that of trying to be more agile with our work, trying to shorten the times so that also people can see what we are doing and can gain the relief as quickly as possible. We are also looking at, we have been helped a lot by you members of the media in terms of awareness on our enforcement program, because every time we do something, we will put it out there. I mean, we do this every week, the decisions that we have made, and of course, the other activities that we are embarking on in terms of popularizing the work that we are doing. And finally, we will also be looking at streamlining our complaints processes so that it's easier for members of the public to complain when they see these issues. So the short answer is that we don't think we have reached that point where all South Africans know where and what we are doing. But we are looking at ways and means of making sure that we are more accessible and that we also play a more preventative approach rather than to look at punishing, which we would have to do when we are required to. But would like to have a situation where we are more proactive in dealing with competition issues. Thank you very much.
Or is there another question? Or NCC would like to make an addition. Please proceed, ma'am. Remember to introduce yourself and the position that you hold at the NCC. Maybe, sorry, ma'am. Maybe for the benefit of my colleagues here, do you perhaps want to speak from the podium? My apologies, colleagues. I think it's important, especially that we are streaming live.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, managers, Deputy Commissioner, all protocol observed, members of the media. My name is Prudence Muilwa. I am the Head of Complaints and Investigations at the National Consumer Commission. I will briefly maybe just update just on the work of the Commission around the incidents that members of the media have referred to. So I need to clarify that the mandate of the National Consumer Commission is to make sure that the products that are sold in the markets are safe and are of good quality. So it is from that perspective that when the incidents arose, we then approached the matter. Yes, we were aware of the incidents, and in fact, I will start with the incident in Buffalo City, where in the demise of the children who were alleged to have consumed the instant porridge. The National Consumer Commission started first by identifying the product that was implicated, which was the instant porridge that was imported or manufactured for Spar as the Spar House brand by Namib Mills, which was a company that is based in Namibia. We then instituted a recall of the product. I must also say that the recall was a precautionary recall on the basis that the cause of death was not yet established, but we went for the implicated product. There was then a precautionary recall to make sure that the safety of consumers is assured. And following that, the investigation then proceeded to look at what is happening. We worked together with the environmental health practitioners, and we also got some information from the police that I obviously cannot speak to right now because of confidentiality around the issues. But I must say what we were concerned about, as I said, was the safety of consumers and the perpetual exposure of the possible, implicated product getting to the houses in South Africa. Hence, our number one response was to make sure that the product was safe in the market. The product was tested. We worked with our scientific partners to make sure that the recalled product is tested. From source, we looked at the retention samples to make sure that they're also tested, so that before we can actually say, let the recall stop, then the product would have been tested. So the product was tested, and we also got a corresponding report from the area that was conducted by the environmental health practitioners that actually cleared the product. However, I must also emphasize that we did not establish the cause of death because that is the work of the police. The National Consumer Commission wanted to just secure to make sure that the product that was implicated was safe for further on-sale, and that's what we did. With regard to the incident in Naledi, and I think that is what is being also referred to now, we worked with the IO to identify the manufacturers of the product. We are currently still busy with the investigation following on the product to make sure that it is tested so that whatever it is, because the issue with the type of investigations that we do is on the quality and safety of the food, not necessarily the cause of death. So what we looked at was just to make sure that the on-sale of the products does not perpetuate the issues. There was also the issue, I think, in Verulam, where we ensured the recall of the product, the recall and the destruction of the biscuits that were not labeled. We made sure that they were all recalled and destroyed. And hence, in my view, we have been able to then also follow up on the areas, not only those, but also on the areas where an incident would happen. We work together with the environmental health practitioners, Department of Agriculture, where issues of the organophosphate was also implicated. So the long and short of it is that from the supply side, wherein the products that were implicated were named, we made sure that they got tested. We also worked with our technical partners who also ensured that the on-sale of the product was safe. I think that's as far as I can say so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Colleagues, as indicated that we are happy to assist the colleagues with the follow-up questions. I know Peto is here. You do have our WhatsApp groups. Please do extend those follow-up questions. I am aware, Commissioners, that there will be a statement that will be issued, basically capturing some of the remarks made here, but also sharing some information on the program that Mr. Dube has shared with us earlier, just for the ease of reference for our colleagues and convenience, of course. So at this juncture, colleagues, I would like to thank you for your support, as always. Sis Poppy has reminded us of the important role that we play in making sure that we increase the intensity of awareness and education around these issues. We are happy that we are partnering on this journey, and we are hoping to see you in Mpumalanga. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, members of the panel. The briefing is officially adjourned.